We're going to do it on female vocals. We're going to do it on male vocals. We're going to do it with Live 9 using Ableton stock plugins. So you can see how to build it, set it up, map the controls, and get something really handy that you can drop on your tracks and use for de-essing. So while I'm waiting for my monitor screen to come up, I want to take a quick second and remember to tell you about the member site, courses.mixitecture.com. This is where you can find hands-on session lessons, free Ableton resources, and all kinds of interesting stuff to help you through the wild wilderness of production, including EQ. This one might be particularly relevant for what we're doing today because we're going to talk about frequency range a lot. And if you don't know the basics like the range of human hearing and why we talk about frequency with numbers and what the word hertz means and which frequencies are good for which sounds, this is the course for you. It's got not only a bunch of presets, but they're made for electronic music, so you can drop on. This is what you actually get, like presets for bass lines, drums, kick drums, keyboards, snares, synths, like lead, pad, chords, backups, vocals, and you can grab it right now, pay what you want pricing, you click buy now, put in the money you want, and that's what you do. Also, if you're down with a little monthly action, sign up to be a Mixitecture supporter for $10 a month. And what that gets you is access to the custom archive of secret instruments and effects tracks and sounds in this product, the archive, which you can only get by becoming a Patreon supporter for $10 a month, which is a huge help for me. It might not sound like anybody could run a business on $10 a month, but it all adds up, and I really appreciate the support to help me keep going, making session lessons, live workshops, videos, the emails where I send you cool stuff on how to use all the above. And inside the archive, you get basses and subs. These are instruments, drum racks, synths, effects racks, and they all they're macro mapped with control knobs, and some of them even have complete guided session lessons inside. So that's what that's all about. I'm not sure if I completely forgot to screen share that whole part. I think I might have. Click to expand. Hey, Prifty. I did. I totally forgot to screen share that whole little spiel. So that's the Mixitecture member site, courses.mixitecture.com. You heard me, you got the idea, so let's just go into live and work out a little bit of de-essing. Here's our audio. Let me know if you can hear me and see me. It's always funny when I make little mistakes like that, but whatever, we're all human, we all make little mistakes. Hope everybody's feeling good. Today, we're gonna work on de-essing. So what is de-essing? I'm gonna show you right now on my vocal why you need it. So I'm gonna go and boost up. So hi, my name is Steve. You know, when you have those really high frequency sounds, they feel disproportionately loud in our ears because our ears are really sensitive to high frequency sounds. So a lot of times you want to cut the volume on that high frequency sound, but the problem is if you do it with only dropping in an EQ, the vocal can get kind of flat and you can end up taking out too much high frequency content, and the high frequencies are really important for intelligibility, for understanding what the person's saying or singing, and it can ruin a sound. All right, question. Can a de-esser be used to remove floor noise from recordings? No. A de-esser is a time-sensitive thing that is only going to take out the volume when a certain sound hits. If you got a problem with noise floor, you might want to use a gate, or possibly a notch EQ at 60 hertz if you're talking about a noise floor from electronic hiss, which is at 60 hertz, or it could be 50 hertz if you're in a Europe or global, depending on the power source you're using. So that's kind of a different problem that we're not going to solve today. Let me play the vocal. We've got a female vocal and a male vocal, and I want to warn you, I am singing on this track. That's how far I go for y'all. I want you to hear male vocals, so mute the return, mute the delay, and let's hear what this female vocal is doing, and I'll point out where the S sound is. Okay, back to here.
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh, well, we'll hit it longer. Unmask latent desire. Arise thy bird of fire, leaning in to this suffering.
All right, you got that?
Leaning in to this suffering.
To this suffering. So this is a great example to play with because we've got all these S sounds. And notice also at the very beginning, she says T, 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 t.
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh, well, we'll hit it longer. Unmask latent desire. Arise thy bird of fire.
So what I'm doing right now is I'm going to high pass filter the vocal and identify how far up do I have to go to get rid of those sounds. Now we're high passed up to 10 kilohertz, and we still hear a lot of S's up there. And let's do this in a different way. Let's do a low pass filter and ask the question, where do I cut this off? If I want to just get rid of that hiss entirely, how do I do that with a low pass filter?
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. Emasculating desire, arise thy bird of fire. Leaning in to this suffering. Lean to this suffering. To this suffering.
Okay, there we got the S
to
sound.
This suffering. To this suffering. To this suffering. To this.
So up to about 4 kilohertz, we hear the voice, the pitch, the melody, the rhythm. We can understand everything that's going on, but it sounds like she has a lisp, like to this suffering, right?
To this suffering, to this suffering.
When we get up to around 6 or 7,
suffering, to this suffering, to this.
Okay, so when we get up to around 6, 7, 8, 9 kilohertz, you hear those S's coming in. They're not really sharp in your ear, but they're definitely present.
To this suffering, to this suffering, to this suffering.
And then when you open it all the way up to 20K, you hear it even more clearly. Now let's play with a bandpass filter and see where, if we had to identify exactly where that S band is, what is the frequency range that is really getting nasty when she says, to this suffering?
To this suffering.
Obviously, it's not down low. Let's go up.
Suffering. To this suffering. To this suffering. To this.
And check it out. It's actually not all the way at the highest band either.
Suffering. To this suffering. To this suffering.
All right. I found it's around 10K. I'm going to get an even narrower band and keep going. So the game I'm playing here is I'm trying to identify if I have to put a notch EQ or a notch filter at one frequency band, what is the number I'm going to type in for the notch EQ to cut out this S sound and make this vocal a little easier to listen to when you turn it up loud? Because remember, vocal processing, we're going to add some compression, we're going to add makeup gain, it's going to get louder, and that means everything in the vocal is going to get louder, and we do not want that hiss to be creeping up on your ear. So let's figure out what band is the worst offender in here. And I'm purposely doing this by ear with the bandpass filter and auto filter. We could drop a spectrum analyzer. We could drop EQ8 and look at the frequencies and see which one is popping up. We'll do that too. But first, let's just find it by ear. Let's say 10 kilohertz, 10,000 hertz, 10 kilohertz. And just for fun, I'm going to change my auto filter to notch and ask the question, does this notch get rid of the de-esser? I mean, does it get rid of the S's?
To this suffering, 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 to this suffering.
Let me know if you can hear the difference when I change the auto filter. Type in filter if you can hear it. I'm going to just go back to the beginning, ditch the loop, and let's listen to this vocal with the filter coming on and off to hear how it affects everything in the voice, not just the S, okay?
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. Emasculating desire, arise thy bird of fire. Leaning in to this suffering, leaning in, it's all that I feel. Leaning in to this suffering.
So what I'm hearing is that when the auto filter is on, when this notch filter is in the whole time, we lose some of the clarity and detail in the voice, and it feels like we're just not getting the whole picture. I'm also hearing some bass in there. and I want to get rid of that. So I want to get a whole different EQ curve on here. Cut out the lows because I think she was tapping her foot on the floor. I think I heard this boop, but it's not coming from the music. I hear a little headphone bleed in there. There's some stuff going on that, we don't want to keep in the final vocal, but before I exported this vocal, I took off all the EQ and everything on there. So we're hearing it basically the whole frequency spectrum that is in there. So let's bypass these and get a little visual cue on here, visual clue, see what's going on. Master spectrum, pew, pew. And just for fun, why don't we drop EQ8, because we're probably going to use that a little bit. And we're going to arrive at using a compressor to solve this problem, believe me. But first, I just want to identify what the problem is and what it looks like and what it sounds like. So here we go, auto filters, everything all bypassed. And let's see the master spectrum. What does this vocal look like?
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh, well, we'll hit it longer. Emasculating desire.
Aha.
Arise thy bird of fire. Leaning in to this suffering.
Okay, if you haven't used Spectrum before, left side is low frequency, right side is high frequency, and I set it up with a fast response time so that the line will bounce and you can see which sound is popping up. Also, the cool thing is that when you move the mouse along this line shows you the peak of each frequency band. This little box tells you exactly what you're looking at. So I can put the mouse right on the line. Inside the box, it says 34.2 hertz. So when you want to find the exact frequency of a specific sound, you put on the spectrum analyzer, put the mouse on the curve, watch visually for where that sound pops up, and then you can read the frequency of it.
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh, well, we'll hit it
I just turned on my
longer.
high-pass filter to cut the lows out.
Emasculating desire. Arise thy bird of fire.
So what I'm seeing when I'm reading this is that most of her voice is in this mid-range from 1,000 and down.
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh, well, we'll hit it longer.
You can see there's like a low octave there, a medium octave there, and all the high stuff that's... Watch how the high end of the line bounces.
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh, well, we'll hit it longer. Emasculating desire.
All right, right there, mask latent desires. I see a little bump here. I read the line, 6.3 kilohertz. Another bump here, about 8K, and it goes up to 11, 10, or 11. So I might have been a little bit high when I was guessing 10K. So we're going to focus on this area from 6,000 up to 9,000 as the zone.
Truth, it's getting harder.
Let's type in 8,500.
Oh, well, we'll hit it longer. Emasculating desire. Arise thy bird of fire. Leaning in.
And this is why Spectrum is so much fun. As I turn this auto filter on and off, we're activating a notch filter at 8.5K. Watch how the master spectrum line changes as I turn the auto filter on and off.
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh, well, we'll hit it longer. Emasculating desire. Arise thy bird of fire. Leaning in to this suffering. To this suffering.
So,
to this.
What I'm trying to illustrate here is that a notch EQ is not the best solution. I mean, we can make a dent in that high frequency sound. We can cut out some of it, but it's not really giving us the best removal of the S's. What we need is something like an EQ that only kicks in when the S sound happens. And the rest of the time, it's not activated because we don't want to chop out all that high frequency content from all the other words. It makes her voice sound dull, flat, lifeless, boring, and not good.
Truth, it's getting harder.
Right? Like,
oh, well, we'll hit it longer. Emasculating desire.
So what if...
Arise thy bird of fire. Leaning in to this suffering. To this suffering.
Like, if I try to automate where that notch comes in and out to catch those S's, it's going to be impossible. Hey, Lauren's here. What's happening? It's really going to be hard to try and, ride the EQ and actually just tweak it only when the S sound comes through. What we really need is a magic robot that can tweak that frequency, duck out the high frequencies, and make it sound like not as piercing only when an S sound comes through. And that is what a de-esser does. It's like a machine that controls the EQ and takes out the high frequencies only at the exact moment they happen, and the rest of the time, the EQ does not cut the high frequencies down because there's a lot of breath and character in the voice that you want to keep. So, in other words, this is a frequency-dependent volume control. So it's not going to do any volume adjustment until one specific frequency comes through, And whenever it hears that frequency, it's going to be like, oh, cut that out. So another application of this could be like, you have probably heard all about sidechain compression up one side and down the other. Well, that's another kind of frequency dependent compression where you have a bass line and you want to cut out the kick drum, right? So you set the sidechain to detect a kick drum, and every time it happens, you duck the volume of the bass line. So you're kind of using one sound to remove volume from another sound. We're kind of doing the same thing here, but with the de-esser, we're using one frequency to cut the volume of the same sound. I know that might be getting a little technical, and I'm going to actually delete the rack that I started and start from scratch with simple Ableton compressor right here. And the thing I'm leaving in place in this chain is a high pass filter. I'm going to title that HPF because I want to make sure we're working with the actual vocal the way I would kind of be using in real life, not with the low end in there. So high pass filter in place. Here is our compressor. What do you do to make a de-esser? Who knows? Pivclip, what's going on? Osman, what's going on? Lauren, Prifty. If you know, tell me what the next step is while I wait. Secretly, I'm drinking coffee. And I know there's always a delay. So the first step is I dropped a compressor on the vocal track, right? Female vocal. Here we go. Compressor. First step is expand that little triangle to see the sidechain options. And we're going to turn on the sidechain here. And actually, I think we can even do it only with the EQ. Let's try that to see if that works. What I'm telling this is I want the compressor to do gain reduction on this sound, but I only want a certain input to trigger the gain reduction. I don't want the whole thing. It's not like I'm compressing the whole vocal for volume. I'm trying to do it only controlling what sound makes the compressor function. And to do that, we're going to EQ the input signal. Hey, Killian, what's happening? So I turn on the EQ switch. I select bandpass filter frequency, which means the input chain of the compressor is going to get a bandpass filter. And since we did all that work with auto filter a minute ago over here, we tuned in when I had it on bandpass 8.5 kilohertz. That's like we're sending the vocal through this bandpass filter before it hits the compressor. And the interesting thing is that it doesn't change the output sound of the compressor. So we're bandpass filtering here.
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. Emasculating desire. Arise thy bird of fire.
And we want this to listen to the female vocal track. So this compressor is saying, all right, what sound is going to make gain reduction happen? Oh, female voice. Okay, what else about the female voice? Is the whole thing going to trigger gain reduction? No, that would be a normal compressor. We're going to EQ the sound so that the only thing that triggers gain reduction is the filtered thing. How do we know what that is, Steve? What does that even mean? That's confusing. Answer, turn on the monitoring. Let me make sure my Q switch is going to the same output. We're going to listen to the input signal and make sure we can hear exactly what's triggering compression.
Truth, it's getting
With that little
harder.
blue switch right there.
Oh well, we'll hit it longer. Emasculating desire. Arise thy bird of fire. Leaning in to this suffering. To this suffering. To this suffering.
So check out how this gain reduction is happening. I'm going to play the whole vocal. Watch that the only time gain reduction happens is on a sibilant sound, like t, ch, s, like that.
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. Emasculating desire.
Yeah.
Arise thy bird of fire. Leaning in to this suffering.
And that's a great example. When she says leaning in, there's no gain reduction happening. And sometimes you even see the sound is close to the threshold, but we're only monitoring the sound of the filtered input. That's the only thing triggering the compression, and that's what makes this a de-esser. And I like to put at 8.5 kilohertz because I usually condense my plugins like this, and I want to know what is this doing. Okay, that's a high-pass filter. That's bypassed. DS at 8.5K. Don't forget to undo your monitor, your Q. Now we can go through and listen to the vocal, and we're going to hear the pure full-range vocal, but anytime the voice hits that little sibilant thing, it's going to duck the compression a little bit.
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. Emasculating desire. Arise thy bird of fire, leaning in to this suffering, to this suffering, to this suffering, to this suffering.
And that is beautiful. It's ducking out those S's. It's like making it kind of like not so sharp. It's kind of like it rounds off the corners on the vocal, but it doesn't cut a whole big hole out of it, if that gives you a visual image. So let me talk for a second about how did I get this compressor to react the way I did. This is more like traditional compressor setup. I want a high ratio, meaning every time that S comes through, I really want to smack it with a lot of gain reduction. Next, I want a very short attack time because S sound, as soon as it hits, I don't want to hear a big transient. I don't want to hear a big like I want it to get it right away, like as short as possible, pretty much, maybe like 1 millisecond. Also, I want a short release time because as soon as that sound is finished, I don't want the gain reduction to stay down. Listen to how weird that would sound.
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. Emasculate into.
Now, a long release time, you're basically just turning down the volume of the whole thing.
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. Emasculate in desire.
I love that.
Arise thy bird of fire, leaning in to this suffering.
So it's getting a lot of cutting out right now. When you're dialing in your de-esser, you should be able to get it to make it sound like the singer has a lisp. If you really are doing de-essing deeply, it's going to sound like the singer is missing a couple of sounds out of their voice. And I'm not making fun of anybody with a lisp. Believe me, my front teeth were like an inch apart when I was little. I had a bad lisp. So cool. I see there's a little conversation going on there. Killian, thanks a lot for hopping in and adding some comments. Juan Pablo, what's going on? All right, how does the look ahead change the compression? It slightly delays the rest of the signal and gives it like kind of, we're not going to use it for de-essing. Let me just say it that way. That's down here to look ahead to kind of like give your compressor a different reaction speed if you're working with fast transients and stuff. I wonder if Ableton explains that. Yes, that's the amount of time that the input signal will be delayed. That's not something that we need to work with de-esser. So I'm going to keep going on the basic settings. So in compressor theory, when you get up to a ratio of 10 to 1 or more, you're really doing limiting, not compressing. So I do on a high ratio, almost like a limiter. And we've basically set up a frequency-dependent compressor so that the only thing that makes this gain reduction happen is the S sound. The way we did that is with a bandpass filter on the vocal. And to make sure we're getting the right sound, we turned on the monitor switch to hear the original and determine what sound it's going to react to. So now let's go around with this frequency control and play from 6K up to 10K and figure out, is there a better place for those S's to grab?
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. Emasculate in desire. Arise thy bird of fire. Leaning in.
Okay, here we go.
To this suffering. To this suffering.
It's not really down there.
To this suffering. To this suffering. To this suffering. To this suffering. To this suffering.
All right, so it's a little higher, up around 9,000. I found a better result. And notice that when I made a steeper Q, it exaggerated the filter even more to make the compressor react harder. So let's listen to that.
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. Emasculate in desire. Arise thy bird of fire. Leaning in to this suffering. To this suffering.
Okay, so you can see that after I changed the frequency input, the gain reduction was happening a little bit too much. We were kind of squashing some of the words that were not really meant to get hit. So I'm taking the threshold up a little bit.
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, truth, it's getting harder.
And now look what's happening. The input signal is bonking up into the threshold kind of too much, which makes it kind of hard to set the threshold. So I'm going to adjust the gain of the input signal. This doesn't change what we're hearing out of the compressor. It just changes how hard the vocal is hitting the gain reduction circuit. I know it's a digital plugin, but in an analog compressor, you would have a whole circuit that takes the input signal from a mic or whatever, and it's saying, okay, well, we're going to tweak the volume on this and filter that just like you would do on any other channel strip. And then the output of that part goes to the gain reduction to say, whenever this sound comes through, whatever it is, then you do gain reduction. So That's what we're working on. Let me know if that makes sense. Type in input if you're following me with how we detect the sound to trigger the de-esser.
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. Emasculating desire. Arise thy bird of fire. Leaning in to this suffering. Leaning in, it's all that I feel. Leaning in to this suffering.
Okay, so I just I figured we're pretty close. This is working. It's de-essing, and I want to make this a usable rack for everybody else. So what did I do? I took the plugin, the compressor. I did Command G to group it, which you could also do with a right click to G group. And now let's get control of these couple things that make it much easier to play with. So what did we do? We turned on the EQ switch, bandpass filter. We set the frequency in the Q. And you know I'm always doing cutoff frequency and resonance together. So we're going to have those two controls, I think, are going to be on first. So let's do frequency and bandwidth so we can dial in which frequency is triggering the gain reduction. Also, we had on the input signal, we needed to adjust the gain to make it basically hit the compression the right way. And I guess that'll be enough for there. Now, in terms of strict compression theory, you need compressor threshold, you need ratio. And I think that might be good because I can pretty much leave a fixed attack time like short, half a millisecond. That's crazy. Release time, 10 milliseconds, pretty straight up. And the game here is going to be to adjust your threshold so that you get the right amount of de-essing. How did I map ratio? I do not want ratio mapped. You can explore that if you understand it and get a better sense of what it is. But this should work to let us dial in where our gain reduction is going to happen. But now, are we ever going to have de-essing at 100 hertz? No. Nobody makes an S sound at 100 hertz. It's not really possible. So let's go from 3,000 up to, 15. That'll let you hear it. How about the bandwidth of the EQ? Let's go 1.5 to 9. I want this to be kind of useful, but not like crazy. And if we park that about 3, that'll work. Default 6,000. 6,000. How about input gain? Input gain. Oh, I can't find which parameter it is. What do? Click on the knob. Click on the. There you go. If you get lost in your list of macro mappings, click on the control you're trying to look for, like here, because you kind of can't read it right there. But then in the browser, it highlights it. Oh, external input gain. Okay, I don't want minus infinity. Let's say -6 in case it's too quiet, plus 12 in case it, just to get a nice usable range, because you're not going to put minus infinity on your input gain. That doesn't make any sense. Dave, interesting. That's almost the same question. Would this help with background white noise, like a background hissing in a sample? Well, technically, yes, but that's not the right way to solve that problem. When you have background noise, you almost always want to go for a gate. And I guess I'm going to have to do a gate workshop, which is super fun. I'm glad you're asking that question. And it's interesting because it's the similar kind of principle where you have to define a threshold of where the effect takes place and then tell the thing, the plugin, what it's doing at that threshold. So a gate and a compressor are actually kind of similar. They're just sort of like an inside-out process. But let's stay focused on here. So we defined our EQ frequency for what band is filtering on the input of the compressor. The EQ bandwidth, gain, threshold is pretty much the main control we're going to be running. So let's make that one red. And that should be enough.
Truth, it's getting harder. Oh well, we'll hit it longer. Emasculating desire. Arise thy bird of
And now that's too
fire.
much, right?
Leaning in to this suffering. Leaning in, it's all that I
Get ready.
feel. Leaning in to this suffering. Leaning in, it's all very real. Leaning in to this suffering.
Is it working?
Leaning in,
I just made a little loop of the offending syllables. Let me know if you can hear the A-B difference. Please type in A-B if you can hear what I'm doing when I turn this de-esser on and off. I dialed it in so the compressor is catching the sibilant frequencies, and it's only ducking the volume of this voice when those sounds come through. So type in A-B if you can hear that. There's on, off. All right, AB, thank you. So what I did at the last thing just right here is I opened up the EQ8 to look at the spectrum analyzer, and I can see that up in the high end, the S's are definitely bouncing, but they're not as loud when the de-esser is on. And for anybody who missed the beginning, the first thing I tried to do was solve this problem with just a notch filter at that frequency. And that ended up, it did solve the problem, but it solved it too much, and it cut out a hole in the whole entire vocal, which took away too much of the breath and the detail and the feeling and the kind of intimacy of like the voice is in your ear and you're really hearing it. And you don't want to EQ your tracks to death and cut out that life of the vocal. The breathing. Oh, nice and gentle. Thank you. Thank you. That's a great word for it. And I had a conversation with this vocalist, Lauren, and she said that specifically the breathing is very important. She does it rhythmically, that like on purpose. That's like a percussion instrument she's doing with her voice, which is so cool. Almost like beatboxing, not quite like beatboxing. But so I don't want to EQ out all those breaths. I don't want to carve it up. I don't want to chop all that off. I just want only the S's to happen. So the last really important concept I want you to get from de-essers is that the compression is turning down the volume of the whole sound. And that's really important. Like, it's not as if we're gonna only cut out the high frequencies and still have a low sound coming through. So if we were listening to a bass sound that had a scratchy high frequency, like when the like somebody hits the frets or something like that, you could put a de-esser on that, but it's gonna duck the volume of the low frequencies too. So whenever the de-esser hits and this gain reduction happens, every frequency in that sound on the output of this compressor, every frequency gets volume reduced, like the whole thing. So if I was going like ooh, zoo, 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 like that kind of a sound, and the little high frequencies came through, the bass would also get quiet when the compressor hit. If you want to do something where you only take out the high frequencies and the low frequencies continue, you basically have to split the sound into multiple bands and then only do de-essing on one band to let the other bands continue. That might be a little bit too detailed. It took me a while to get it, but the cool thing is that you don't really have to know all that. All you have to know is how to drop this plugin on a track, dial in the threshold, and basically it's going to work. We set it to 6K. And then, as you get more detailed, you could be like, oh, I hear more highs at 10K. So you go, 10,000, and you get more control over weight or whatever you're going to do. But the threshold is the main control. Maybe I should put that on macro 1, honestly, to make like a 1 knob de-esser. But that's cool. That's what we're doing for females. 1234. Cool. We got a little bit of time. I'm going to bring in the male vocal and do another example of de-essing just so you can hear how it might be a little bit different on male vocals. And now we have a chain. Jump. I'll show you the whole process of figuring it out over here. And this is me officially singing on record. I'm not the best singer in the world, and I didn't really work this out super well, but I did auto-tune it a little bit. So at least what I wanted to do was create a problem. I wanted to make a male vocal that has S's so we could fix it. That was really the whole goal of the whole purpose of recording this. So this is what it is. Aha! Nothing going on right there. Why not? Well, because male vocal's only in the chorus. Little mix note for anybody doing sessions. It really helps to drop markers so you can cut loops and get the part of the sound you want to work on when you want it, instead of having to scrub audio all the way through and try to find out where is that damn sound. To this suffering, lean and in, it's all that I feel. Oh my God. Lean and in to this suffering. So we're looking for the S's. Lean and in, it's all very real. Lean and in to this suffering. 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 To this. Okay, so I got a little thing with the to this suffering going on. Hey, Torben, how you doing? Sebastian, how you doing? And now I'm going to quickly go through this male vocal de-esser and dial in, find out what frequencies are popping up and which ones do I need to cut out. Let's get another EQ8 on here just so we can see the frequency range and figure out where is the S sound we have to get.
Lean and in, it's all that I feel. Lean and in to this, suffer and do this, suffer and
right
do this, suffer.
Okay, so right around 9K. This is a vocal stem, so it's 4 tracks panned left, right with harmonies, kind of auto-tune the shit out of them. So what I did was I looked in EQ8 frequency analyzer to see where the S sound was popping up, put the mouse around that area in the little box over here. I'm reading about like 9 something. So let's turn this on, dial that in 9100, that's 9.1 kilohertz, and see if we can pull the threshold down to catch those S's.
Lean and in.
Yeah, 10K, right?
All that I feel, lean and in to this, lean and in to this, suffer and do 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 this, suffer and.
Aw, it's not working at all. Why not? I know the exact answer. I didn't know the answer till I caught that mistake. Every time you drop a de-esser, you have to set the audio input and tell this compressor, what sound are we listening to? What sound is going to trigger the compression? Because if you don't set that up, it's not going to do anything. I was messing around trying to get the right control on there, and we need to have this on male the vocal. Okay. Now the male vocal audio is going to trigger the compression. So let's get our threshold back up, ready to go. Now I'm going to pull this down and listen to our compression.
Lean and in, it's all that I feel. Lean and in to this. Lean and in to this, suffer and do this, suffer and do this, suffer and do this, suffer and.
So you can see that the gain reduction is bouncing only on that S sound, and
lean and in to this, suffer and
right over here in EQ8 where that spectrum is hopping up, you can see it's noticeably lower. So let's A/B that and just look at the spectrum and make sure we're kind of doing the right thing.
lean and in to this, suffer and do 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 this, suffer and lean and in.
It's all that I feel. Lean and in to this, suffer and.
All right.
Lean and in, it's all very real. Lean and in to this, suffer and. Lean and in, it's all that I feel. Lean and in to this, suffer and.
Yeah. I just put one controller on both those de-essers so we could hear the male and female vocal together and see if it makes a difference. Let's listen to that one more time.
Lean and in to this, suffer and. 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 To this, suffer and.
That is really obvious to me right now. Yeah, Pivclit, you won 10K. You won the 10K award. Ooh, Torben said need longer release. I want to know what you heard that makes you say that, because I could definitely agree with you. But are you hearing that, or are you seeing the reaction time? And what do you think is going to be the right release time?
Lean and in to this, suffer and. 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 To this, suffer
What do you think about that with 35 milliseconds? That's a great answer, and I did not actually catch that myself. I might not have picked up on that, but I really appreciate you got good ears to hear that. That's pretty cool. Maybe because I'm also talking and hearing in headphones and trying to do a bunch of things at once. The reduction needle jumps back instantly and too short. Yeah, that was a good catch on that one. Let's just listen from the beginning.
If it's getting harder, oh well, we'll hit it longer. Emasculating desire, arise thy bird of fire. Reading it to this suffering. Reading it, it's all that I feel. Reading it to this suffering. Reading it, it's all very real. Reading it to this.
iPhone speakers. That's amazing because an iPhone speaker is optimized for voice and it would probably sound like everything in the mid-range is louder to begin with. So an S sound is even more prominent. So actually, that's pretty amazing. If you want to check your de-essers, listening on laptop speakers or mobile phones is going to really make it clear. Because I notice on my phone, the S sound, I hear it as distortion. It's not even like, oh, it's an S. It's like, so hey, pretty damn cool, man. So detailed listening and could not hear the S getting fainter. And also the needle told me it was only cutting off the initial attack. Heavy duty. That's good detail. So thank you for that. The last thing I did was I just dialed in a little bit of a reverb and a delay. And mostly, I wanted this to sound cool, but I thought it would be a good illustration that when the S's are gone from the original, then your reverb is easier to work with, right? Let's try and see if you can hear the reverb now.
If it's getting harder,
Put it up nice and
oh
loud.
well, we'll hit it longer. Emasculating desire.
Listen to how the S goes through the reverb with the de-esser off.
If it's getting harder, oh well, we'll hit it longer. Emasculating desire.
It's like flapping around up in the high end. Now I'm going to turn the de-esser on and let's hear if the reverb sounds a little bit like less of a cheap reverb.
If it's getting harder, oh well, we'll hit it longer. Emasculating desire. Arise thy bird of fire. Reading it to this suffering. Reading it, it's all that I feel.
I'm not sure if you could hear that. I could definitely hear it. And it's kind of a cool thing that it's like saying the higher quality your original source is, the easier everything else is. Now you could go to your reverb and pull down the high frequency over here or put an EQ after it or even put a de-esser on the reverb, but you don't have to. If you can de-ess the vocal first and make it sound really clean and crisp so you get all the emotion that you want and nothing distracting you like the tss, then it's really easy to just throw the vocal up into a reverb, throw it into a delay, and you got a nice sound, nice polished vocal, everything comes together.
It's getting harder, oh well, we'll hit it longer. Emasculating desire, arise thy bird of fire. Reading it to this suffering. Reading it, it's all that I feel. This suffering.
Yeah. All right, before I start dub mixing all day long. Oh, Pivka says you could really hear it, no problem. All right, cool. Thank you. So there we go. That's how to set up a de-esser. And along the way, I talked a little bit about what I do for making mixes easier, like dropping some loops in here. And I even made a special loop at the end called instrumental mix, because this is where it's going to get interesting. I like to share presets and plugins and make it all fun to play with, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this female de-esser rack and the male de-esser rack and upload them into the Mixitecture free resources area, which is here on the site. So you go to courses.mixitecture.com. In this free Ableton resources area, you're going to find you're going to find a module called free presets. Getting excited here. And that has a whole bunch of stuff in there, some synths and everything else, but I'll put in the de-essers so you can download them. But for anybody who really wants to learn this, I thought what would be cool is I could build a session lesson, which means I take this whole project, save it, pack it up, and give it to you to download to dial in all this stuff yourself. And what would make that more fun is to actually mix a couple of stems, right? So what does that mean? That means in the instrumental mix, you could have a loop just to work with the sounds. And some of these need a little EQ, maybe a little, I don't know, compression or something. So you basically have a 4-channel mix, guitar, bass, drums, and keyboard, or four stems of instruments with female vocal, male vocal, ready to play with, and you basically have the challenge of take the session, open it up, change the threshold, and make it sound better than it did before. Nice bass, thank you, thank you. It's a pretty simple exercise. It's not really that complicated because I basically solved every problem in the mix except for using the de-esser. So I'm thinking of how I can make this into a cool project that would teach people a little something about using de-esser, make it really easy to hear the difference, and not be so difficult that you have to like do a whole mix in order for it to make sense. So let me know how you feel about that. If you want to play with a hands-on session lesson in de-essing, we could put that together. And I'm about done. That was like 45 minutes, and we got to play with, let's just summarize what I did from the beginning. So the first thing is we listened to the vocal, and we identified what the sounds are that are getting in the way and how that hurts your ears when you turn it up louder. So the S, ch, t, those are sibilant frequencies that are a little too loud. And we used a bandpass filter to just find those frequencies, which were up between 5,000 and 12,000, around 9K, 10K. There's a lot of that sound to deal with. Then we thought, okay, so maybe I can solve the problem by just EQing it out, right? EQ those sounds. Well, we did that with a notch filter, and we did successfully cut out the S's, but the problem was the vocal became lifeless, dull, flat, not shiny, not shimmery, not interesting, a little harder to understand, sounded like it was badly recorded. Like, if you EQ too much of it trying to take out the S's, you make it sound crappy, and we can't do that, So what we needed was a way to EQ and take out those high frequencies only when they hit. Like a magic robot that turns down the volume on those high frequencies only when they're coming through, and the rest of the time it bypasses the EQ. That is effectively what we did when we created a de-esser, which you could describe as a frequency-dependent compression. So the trick is that, like an EQ, get this in your brain, an EQ only takes out one frequency of the sound, and everything else keeps going through. A de-esser is different than that. A de-esser turns down the volume on the whole entire vocal. Every frequency band gets quieter, but the thing is that volume drop only happens when the high frequencies are coming through. So it's kind of a trick. It works really well on monophonic sounds like vocals or bass guitars or something, where it's only one sound happening at one time. Because if you think about a vocal, when you're actually saying the word S, there's no other sound in the there's no vocalizing happening. Like it's only like it's like a quick little moment where that consonant comes through, and at that one little moment, it's okay to turn down the volume on the whole entire vocal. That's a little bit of a conceptual difference. We're not just, a de-esser is not an EQ. It's a different animal. It's a volume reduction of the whole entire sound that only happens when one little thing comes through. And to define what is going to trigger the gain reduction in the de-esser, we used a basic Ableton compressor. We clicked on the sidechain function, told it which sound to listen to, which is the same as the vocal. We turned on the EQ switch, activated the bandpass filter, tuned it in on what frequency, like 8K, 9K, whatever. And then finally, we use the threshold to determine how the gain reduction reacts. Short attack time, short release time, but 30 milliseconds was around the right thing. And then we just talked briefly about ratio. Let me see what's Torben saying here. Would be dope with a device made to work like Wave's Vocal Rider, like a fancy sidechain level automator. Yep, I agree with you on that one. I don't have that, so I'm not sure what it feels like to work with the workflow on that. I'm kind of trying to I'm definitely making devices that anybody could use with Ableton stock plugins for Live 9 and Live 10. And even more important than giving you a preset, I really want you to understand why it works. So when you start dialing it in, you can adapt it. And honestly, the difference between a de-esser for female vocals and a de-esser for male vocals is not that big of a difference because everybody makes the S sound pretty much the same. Hot tip, I might use 2 de-essers on a vocal, or maybe even more, where if you have like a really sibilant voice at, I don't know, 4,000 and 7,000, you don't want to try and grab that with a big wide band. It's better to have 2 tight bands that react quickly, hit the gain and get off of it, so that you can customize how it's reacting to different sounds. And I'm also going to use EQ, like the vocal is going to get some EQ a little bit, de-essing, and then, compressor and makeup gain also happening. So I hope that's not too much all coming at you at once. If you have any more questions, type them on in and let me know what you're thinking. That's going to be it for today. You can look out for, I guess I'll make an update and tell you all on the group and everything when I have these new things uploaded. And then tomorrow we're going to do some more harmony over here. I built a new lesson where we're making a bass line to play along with a piece of music, where we're learning about the minor scale, downward scale motion, octaves, what register means, some fun music theory, but mostly it's about playing along and how to hear a piece of music, build a bass line that goes with that track, and understand what notes you're playing and why. So we're not just guessing, we're not just randomly playing notes, we're not copying, we're not imitating. You're actually going to write a bass line in this example and know why you're doing it and why it sounds good. So that's coming up tomorrow. Oh, Torben, cool. So it's simple, but automatically adjusts gain level like an auto rider, where you set the threshold and span, and it ducks or ups the vocal level. Oh, in comparison to the mix. Oh, right. That's like what you do with automating a vocal. That's a crazy detailed thing. But honestly, in the world of like pro vocal production, you literally go through the whole track and you look at the automation on the vocal volume and you bring it up or down to go with certain words and phrases and make it emotionally work. The peak words are going to be a little louder. And that's important because that's different from compressing it harder or less hard, which changes the tone and the feel. If you don't want to squash your vocal, but you do want to change the volume of it, you might have to hit some automation. Right, so the vocal always cuts through. Awesome. Hey, thanks for hanging out. I love it that people are asking questions in the group, and then other people are answering the questions while we're going on. That's a big help. So thanks, Killian, and people who know a little more than the basic beginners. I really appreciate you jumping in to answer questions. I have to look up a little more on the look-ahead detection, because I know it changes the timing a little bit. I don't actually use that very much, so I don't have really good examples of when you should use that, but I know the examples are out there. And before I talk all day, thanks a lot, everybody. Check out the free resources in the member site, and I'll see you tomorrow for another broadcast.